Hello everybody on Facebook. Welcome to a RedRaiders.com pregame show brought to you as always by University Medical Center. I'm Don Williams from the Avalanche-Journal Sports Department, joined this evening by Carlos Silva Jr., sitting in for AJ Media Sports Editor Nicholas Talbot. And we're going to preview this evening Texas Tech's game against Oklahoma, 7 p.m. Saturday up in Norman. And Carlos, I guess both of these teams kind of have the Iowa State blues.
They certainly do. Certainly do, man. That's pretty funny. The old clones have kind of really gotten the best of both of them. But the one thing that does, I guess, put a little bit of a positive note is the fact that the Cyclones were able to get that victory against Oklahoma in Norman. Now, will Texas Tech be able to do that? I don't know, because the defense hasn't played up to par as we've seen in the first 5 games, but certainly it should be an interesting one because you got 2 offensive teams, especially with Baker Mayfield, who a lot of Texas Tech fans are very, very familiar with.
Yeah, and I think that storyline is so old that really the Baker Mayfield topic was a non-starter this week. Mm-hmm. Very few people even brought it was almost not even brought up this week. It was a hot story, of course, a year or two ago, and nationally. And this week it seems like not even around here, but nationally it's kind of it's like, okay, that story's been told anymore, and now question is, can the Red Raiders match Baker Mayfield? And he's been a little bit banged up, but Carlos, my concern is for the Texas Tech offense, which looked, started off the season really strong with a couple of back-to-back 50-point games against Eastern Washington and Arizona State, and then kind of settled in. And I was just looking at it today, and the Red Raiders, 4 of the last 5 games have not gone above 35 points. You take away that Kansas game, and the offense has been pretty middling by Texas Tech air raid standards, and these last 6 quarters in a row have really made the offense kind of the question mark on this team right now.
Well, I think that the one thing that everyone's been talking about is, can you get the running game in a consistent pace? It's been consistent at certain times. They've had the big plays by Trey King, or you've had a big play by Desmond Nisby or Justin Stockton. Unfortunately, he may be out for this. I know you mentioned it in one of your stories in the Avalanche-Journal. He's kind of dealing with a head injury, I guess is the way Coach Kingsbury mentioned it. That certainly is a huge loss for them. I believe he's one of the top 4 rushers in the Big 12, so certainly something that you want to watch to see if Desmond Nisby has been able to learn some of the offense, be able to get in some of those block and protection type deals. If Trey King's able to make some big plays as well. But I think the one person that everyone's really talking about right now is, how is Nick Shimonek going to kind of respond to this? I think even though he's had some very good numbers just overall, everyone just seems to think that they are the better quarterback than Nick Shimonek. Oh, he should be running. I frankly think he's been doing fine. It's just a matter of the offense just needs to find that player to make a big play, make a catch. I honestly think he kind of put some of that onus as well on Derek Willis, who hasn't played well since the Houston game. I remember the big drop that should have been a touchdown since then. Haven't really heard much from him. Kiki QT has been injured a little bit, but he's back. Dylan Cantrell, he's kind of made some plays, but not as many as he's made earlier on. I just think the competition is ramped up, and I think the Texas Tech football team is certainly going to use this, hopefully, as a barometer to see where they are. Because, I mean, if you're playing up at Oklahoma in Norman against a player like Baker Mayfield that has been kind of the guy that Texas Tech fans get riled up for, I think that's going to kind of get the football team riled up a little bit as well.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I think it's probably – I think there's probably blame to go around when you talk about the offensive struggles. The thing that kind of brings it home to me a little bit is – last week, 0 touchdown passes. Mm-hmm. And if you go, that's the first time that's happened for Texas Tech since the 2014 game against Texas. And
yes,
that 2014 game against Texas, you had a ready-made excuse because they had Vincent. That was the game that Patrick Mahomes got knocked out in the first half, and the Red Raiders were reduced to running Vincent Testaverde out there. Yes. He was a freshman walk-on, and it was pretty much hopeless offense the rest of that night. But beyond that, the Red Raiders not only did not have a touchdown pass last Saturday, they didn't have a touchdown pass in the second half at West Virginia. So it's 6 quarters now without a touchdown pass, and 6 quarters that Texas Tech has been outscored 60-20. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I think the receivers really have kind of been in a dry spell. Nick Shimonek has not looked the same as he did in the first month of the season, and the offensive line is kind of remains kind of a work in progress, which is not unexpected. And the running backs, while Trey King has been kind of a feel-good story lately, I don't know that, he's not really a dynamic playmaker guy. He's more of a hard effort guy who's going to give you, if there's 3 yards there, maybe he can give you 4 or 5. He's kind of going to give you what's there. But he's not a guy that I think that really scares defenses, and so that makes it more difficult. And then add on to that, Oklahoma defensively has not been a real good ball club, and I think this has been true. You even go back, last year, Texas Tech lit them up in that 66-59 game here, and both teams had 834 yards. And it seems like the sum of Oklahoma's star rankings on defense adds up to more than what these guys have actually produced on the field. But with that said, Tech may be facing the best defensive individual that they've seen here lately, in Ogbonnaya Okoronkwo.
And you said that correctly, unlike me.
Oklahoma's edge guy who's made kind of all these midseason All-America teams.
Yeah, well, not only that, but then he's been able to get to the backfield. I mean, he's had 12 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, so certainly a guy that I'm sure the offensive line is very aware may get some double teams, so that may free up some other guys that may have not made some plays so far. And then, of course, you also have the linebacker, I'm trying to remember his name, Emmanuel Beal. He's leading the team in tackles, also doing very well in the Big 12 standings as well. Those are two guys that in the front 7, if you're an offensive lineman or even the running back, making some blocking protections as well, those are two guys you have to focus on. And I know one person that kind of asked a question here, Drew Wallace, does Shimanek thrive in the passing game against a weak OU passing defense, or does Kingsbury keep trying to establish the run? We'll get to that, but I think the biggest thing that they have to do right now is just protect Nick Shimanek and give him time to find those wide receivers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one thing where maybe not having Justin Stockton, and I'm going to guess that they are not going to have Justin Stockton on Saturday. That could be a detriment to you, because I think it's going to be very important that you pass protect Shimanek and that you don't have Ogbonnaya Okoronkwo just disrupting everything that you try to do. To answer the question, I think that if you're Texas Tech, you need to get the passing game going, because you don't have the dynamic playmaker in the running game to go, I think, kind of lead the way to a win in Norman. You got to get Nick Shimanek going, and you got to get guys like Kiki QT and Dylan Cantrell being big factors again. I mean, it's been about a month now where you haven't had outside of T.J. Vasher, you have not had a 100-yard receiving game by any of your top dogs.
And I know Coach has kind of mentioned it a couple times, and I think this is going to be a word that we use a lot. One-dimensional. That's what the team has been, because you haven't been able to get that one dynamic running back. Yes, the sum of all the parts. Justin Stockton, a very speedy guy. Desmond Nisby, the big bruising guy that'll go up the trenches, into the trenches, and then Trey King, who you mentioned, has a little bit of speed but can still give you that extra effort. All three of them together would be a great running back, but unfortunately you have to use certain packages for each of them, and I think that's the adjustments that some of the defenses have made, is when they see a guy back there, they kind of know what's going to happen, especially with the fact that it's been mentioned, at least on the airwaves and just publicly, that Desmond Nisby has not learned this offense in terms of the fact that he doesn't know some of the blocking protections, so that's limited him a little bit in terms of what plays he's been in. That's why you've seen Justin Stockton come in a little bit more. That may be one of the reasons that Texas Tech may struggle a little bit against Oklahoma, because you're not seeing Justin Stockton a lot. He's not able to call some of these protections. But one of the other things that you have to look at is the fact that Oklahoma's not forced that many turnovers. I believe they're ranked one of the, not necessarily one of the worst, but I know they're one defensive back, Parnell. I can't remember his first name right here, but I know he's only got about a couple interceptions. He's one of the guys that has made some plays for Oklahoma, and I think that's going to be the biggest difference, is kind of like what you said. Can you get your wide receivers going? Are you going to be using a bunch of bubble screens? Are you going to be using some deals where you use a jet sweep, hopefully in a better situation, or you find some screens? Because they're not going to be rushing the quarterback as much as they have, because you don't have that running attack.
Let's flip it around now, and Carlos, Oklahoma, they have Baker Mayfield back at quarterback. This is a team, there's probably nobody in the nation, nobody in the FBS that lost more skill position talent, I think, than Oklahoma did last year, when you consider D.D. Westbrook was the Biletnikoff Award winner there at running back. You had Samaje Perine gone, was a 4th-round draft pick. You had Joe Mixon gone. He was a, 2nd-round draft pick, if I remember right, by the Cincinnati Bengals. So you had 2 fantastic running backs and a top receiver in the nation. All those guys gone. I thought Oklahoma's going to take a step back. They have to offensively because you just, even if you're OU, you don't replace that kind of talent. But they've done a heck of a job. I mean, and they're still scoring 42 points a game and averaging about 580 yards. They're still one of the top teams, I believe 2nd in the nation in total offense and up there in the top 10 in scoring offense. And so it's a team that's kind of breaking in some new weapons. It's kind of been a three-headed. They've kind of been a committee approach at running back.
Yeah, with Trey Sermon kind of leading the way for him. I think that's been one of the things that I know Lincoln Riley, talking on the Big 12 media teleconferences, he was wondering how that would work out, and it certainly worked out well for them because you had 2 guys, like you mentioned, Perine and Mixon, who were that 1-2 thunder and lightning, so to speak. One would have the big runs, the other one would kind of bash everyone. Now you've got 3 guys that can kind of do that. But fortunately for Texas Tech, their rush defense has been very good this year. They've been able to slow down some guys, like a Kalen Ballage against Arizona State. And then, of course, you had the running back from Kansas that I cannot remember the name to right now.
Khalil Herbert.
Khalil Herbert. Thank you, Don. That's why you're here. But when you look at those guys and what they've been able to do in terms of a defense compared to last year, they've been able to make tackles. And more importantly, their defensive line, who we've mentioned before, Broderick Washington, and then of course Mike Thomas. They've been able to funnel some of those running backs or just some of the ball carries to their linebackers, and that's why they've been able to make all those tackles. And I think that's what's made them so successful so far. But the fact is, can they slow down Baker Mayfield, who's one of the more prolific passers in the Big 12, along with Nick Shimonek?
Yeah, and I was going to say to follow up a little bit on your thought. So this week, Pro Football Focus. Just yesterday, actually came out with a graphic that said one of their analysts said Dakota Allen might be the best linebacker in the nation this year. They had him, I don't know exactly how they calculate their grade, but they gave him a grade of 91.0 and said that was 3rd best out of 346 linebackers in the nation. And so you need him and Jordan Brooks to really be on their games on Saturday, and also that front 4 as well. I was going to mention, you mentioned Trey Sermon. Just a personnel note for OU. It'll be interesting. I don't know if Tech will see maybe Abdul Adams this week. He's the guy who was kind of hot there around weeks 4, 5, and 6, and he's missed the last 2 games. But then, with him out, Rodney Anderson has had 195 yards the last couple of weeks, and the Anderson kid had 147 in that game last week against Kansas State. So, kind of a question of which running backs will the Red Raiders see, but they need to contain them because they need to get Baker Mayfield into some uncomfortable situations where they're, say, 2nd and 12 or 3rd and 10 and those sorts of things.
Although one of the good things for Baker Mayfield, is the fact that he's got Mark Andrews, one guy that did come back and did have some success. He's one of the guys that he's been throwing to, like a Marquise Brown or a C.D. Lamb or a Jeff Badette. They've all had at least close to 25 to 20-plus catches, and then, of course, their yards are about 520 for Andrews, 429 for Marquise Brown, 393 for Lamb. And then, of course, when you look at the touchdowns, they're spread out. It's not one guy making that play, so I think that's one thing you have to be aware of for Texas Tech, and I think that maybe one of the things that helps them is the fact that they are very diverse in the secondary. They have a bunch of guys that can make plays. You've mentioned some of them, Jalen Lane, Vontae Dorsey, Octavius Morgan. You can keep going with the list, whereas last year they probably didn't have all those guys where you can kind of throw them out. And even Justice Parker, if you want to throw him out there, he's had some pretty good games the last few times. But I think that the one guy that I am wondering what's going to happen here in terms of kind of response is Tony Jones. It's a guy that was kind of coming on early, and now you kind of haven't heard his name so far on defense.
Well, and I asked Cliff Kingsbury about that this week. Said the playing time there at the rush end position, is it being based more on what Colin Hill is doing or has been doing, or more on what Tony Jones has not been doing? And he said Colin Hill's been playing well, and Colin has 6 tackles for loss, which is 2nd on the team right now. He's kind of come into his own kind of in that year 2 to play for the Red Raiders. He said what they want to do with Tony Jones is they want him to be able to play every package on defense, and they're kind of still getting him up to speed on they can use him in some situations, but he maybe doesn't know the defense, doesn't know all the packages, all the play calls well enough to be an every down guy. They want to get him to that point. And in the meantime, Colin Hill, like I say, is kind of giving you that second-year step up in productivity, and that's why you're seeing more Colin Hill at the rush-in position these last, really, I guess, about 3 games or so.
And, of course, for those that aren't aware, Tony Jones was a linebacker that was brought in from Butler Community College, was moved to rush-in, and that's where he kind of made his mark a little bit earlier. And then, of course, as Don just kind of mentioned that. But I guess just kind of looking at Oklahoma's defense compared to Texas Tech's offense, I guess I almost feel like Texas Tech has the advantage here just because they've got so many playmakers. It's just like you said, Don, they just have to make plays now.
Yeah, but I think I have a bigger question about it than you do. I think,
Okay.
I think, and just kind of talking a little bit before we went on, you're expecting a shootout. I really don't have the confidence in the Tech offense right now after what we've seen the last 6 quarters. Particularly, if they were, it would be one thing maybe if they were at home, but you're going into one of the toughest road environments to play in the Big 12. It's going to be a 7 p.m. kickoff night game, so I expect that OU fan base to be pretty fired up, pretty cranked up, and that's going to make it all the more difficult for Nick Shimonek. When you're talking about a guy who's a quarterback and receivers who have been in a slump, that's not a real good place to go to snap out of it.
Well, speaking of the slump, I know they've had the last 2 losses. Obviously a tough one. I know this has been the talk, at least early on, was Cliff Kingsbury and obviously the hot seat. Obviously it's gotten a little bit warmer with the 2 losses, but they certainly have plenty of time. They've got 5 games to get 2 victories here. They are at 4. You need 6 to be bowl eligible. The first one, of course, that we're going to focus on is Oklahoma, which clearly you and I have a little bit of differing opinions, but I certainly think they can be competitive if they're able to run the ball and not necessarily get those 3 and outs like you had mentioned. But I guess for you, when you're kind of looking at what Oklahoma and Texas Tech have, what are going to be some keys that you kind of look at to see if Texas Tech's going to be positive or if Oklahoma's going to have the advantage here?
I think you got to get Cliff Kingsbury's got to figure out a way to get Nick Shimonek in the offense going early, whether that be some quick throws, 5-yard gain here, 8-yard gain there, to move the chains, to kind of don't give the crowd a reason to really get into it. Get into it early. Don't give a crowd a reason to pile on. But we've talked about this. We talked about this all through the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. One of the big keys for Texas Tech has been they won that turnover battle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every game for the first 5 games at least, maybe the first 6 games.
Had a couple pick sixes too.
And yes, exactly, and that has changed. They lost that column last week, 3-1, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And you need to get that. I mean, that's going to be a big key. I mean, you need to get turnovers and minimize your mistakes, so that you don't have. So the momentum plays that change the momentum plays are not plays there are plays that go for you versus going against you.
So I know you were at the press conference on Monday. Was there any talk of anyone mentioning the fact that there are 2 guys behind Nick Shimonek, that being Jet Duffy and McLean Carter? Have there been any mentions of that or any questions to Cliff as to whether they are looking to maybe have a little spark to the offense, if you will? Not necessarily saying that they would bench him, but just give a spark because they've got more of a running threat, so to speak.
Well, we asked Cliff Kingsbury about that, and really he pretty much shut that down, said, it's not happening. Not happening. Mm-hmm. Well, and he kind of deflected a little bit from Nick Shimonek and said, on the screen pass that was intercepted,
they missed a block.
They missed a block. Yeah. Nick Shimonek threw the ball where it was supposed to be, but Marcel Spears was not supposed to be there if other guys were executing. So he felt like Nick Shimonek is still playing at a acceptable level. Now I think the other question is, how ready are people who are the guys who are behind him? Mm-hmm. Is McLean Carter an improvement on Nick Shimonek? Well, he was kind of he was a guy that you took in the recruiting cycle, kind of his insurance when Patrick Mahomes left. Correct. Otherwise, if Patrick Mahomes were still with the Red Raiders, Tech probably would not have signed McLean Carter, is my sense. And then you have Jet Duffy, who's the player that's kind of the exciting guy that everybody is eager to see and can't wait to find out what he's made of when he gets on the field. But you got to remember, he was away from the program, not practicing from about mid-season last year to mid-August this year. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to make up that time in even a period of weeks, because really major college football teams have heavy workout days only 2 days a week. Sunday, in Texas Tech's case, they have a light practice on Sunday. Your NCAA mandated day off on Monday, and then your heavy your heavy days are Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday is another light walkthrough workout day where you're not on the field you're only out there on the field for about an hour, and you're not in pads. And so when you're a quarterback who's missed a ton of time and you're only getting really 2 heavy, intense workout practice days, it takes a lot of those to make up what you missed over a year's time. Throw in as well that, okay, the first team quarterback is going to get at least 2/3 of the reps, of the game plan reps on Tuesday and Wednesday with the number 1 offense. So that's more time that guys like McLean Carter and Chad Duffy are not getting. So I don't see those guys as being likely to come in and play a lot and change the dynamic of this team over the last month. You pretty much are who you are right now, and your success is going to be dependent on Nick Shimanek and the other guys on the team.
Well, I guess on that note, how do you kind of see this going? I'll start because I think it's going to be a shootout, frankly. I think the Texas Tech defense may get a couple pick sixes. That may change some momentum in that way. And I think eventually this is going to be weird, but for some reason I think Oklahoma's very, very vulnerable when they do play in Norman. I think Texas Tech gets a 53-46 win.
Goodness gracious, Carlos. My goodness.
I made you laugh, you know.
That'll be an entertaining game.
That's what I do.
Also be a fun one to write on deadline.
Yes, it will.
I wish I had your confidence, but again,
I don't know if it's confidence. I think it's just blind guess.
But as I've said earlier, I think that 12th man, though, that's not the that's the Aggies trademark as opposed to the Sooners trademark. I think the 12th the environment of playing at Oklahoma, coupled with the offensive lull or offensive slumber that the Red Raiders have been in for the last 6 quarters, I think this is going to be a real tough place to win. And my pick in this is going to be 48-28 OU. I think, which I think
that's fair.
The line is about 19.5, 20 right now, and I think that's probably about how the game's going to go. And we've gone all this time and haven't talked about the kicking game as well. Red Raiders
absolutely.
With no confidence. If you have a 4th and 5 from the Oklahoma 25, what are you going to do? Versus you look at Oklahoma, for example.
Austin Seibert.
And he's made 5 out of 5 field goals the last 2 weeks.
He's a good punter, too.
Yeah. So I think Baker Mayfield will do what Baker Mayfield does, lead them to about 6 touchdowns, a couple of field goals, and OU 48-28.
The only thing I can kind of counter with your deal, Don, is the last time there was a team that was an underdog by about 20 points was Iowa State. That's all I can say. Now, granted, seeing Iowa State in person, they certainly have a very good defense, can play very well. I'll be interested to see how Oklahoma plays against Texas Tech, because it seems like, and I know you and Nick have talked about it before, that cloud defense where you kind of drop 8, that's really what's giving them problems. I'm interested to see if that's what Oklahoma does or if they continue to do what they do. So
and I think they'll I tend to think Oklahoma will kind of continue to do what they do, because my sense is, okay, West Virginia doing this, West Virginia does that a lot every week, not just against Texas Tech. And I think Iowa State incorporates a lot of the same stuff into their package. But I don't think that's something that, if you don't normally play it, you're going to install it in a week's time. I think you're kind of going to keep doing what you do. And I don't expect to see as much of that from OU as the Red Raiders have seen the last couple of weeks.
Well, certainly we'll have a lot more to talk about on the podcast. Of course, the Red Raiders podcast on the old SoundCloud.com. You can look up LubHub, or you can look up the Red Raiders podcast. Don and I will be on there, and then we'll also speak to a beat writer from the Tulsa World as well. We'll get his perspective on Oklahoma, and certainly your perspective as to how Texas Tech may be able to get going on offense, even though I believe you don't think they will be able to. So
that's, I guess, put a wrap on it for this time. We appreciate you tuning in here on Facebook. And as Carlos said, plenty more coverage on Texas Tech football all week. It never ends on RedRaiders.com and LubbockOnline.com. We appreciate you tuning in to this RedRaiders.com pregame show. For our engineer-producer, Brad Tollison, and for Carlos Silva Jr., I'm Don Williams from the Avalanche-Journal. Take care, and we'll talk to you again soon.